Greetings from Indiana. Today would have been my father's 79th birthday. And a while back, a month or so ago, my mom sent me my dad's Zippo lighter. Now, my dad was a cigarette smoker. He quit smoking in the late 1970s after his dad died of lung cancer at age 55. So, this lighter has not struck a flame in around 50 years. I just changed the flint and put fluid in. Actually, I added a flint. It looked like it didn't even have flint left in it. So, I'm going to try now and see if this will light. And if so, it'll be the first fire in about 50 years. And there we go. Let me tell you about my dad. Stuff that I was told, stuff that I remember. Might be wrong, but it's my dad, so it's my story. He was born in 47. His father was Marine, wounded a couple times in the islands of the South Pacific. His mother was a woman who was beautiful enough to have been a model and intelligent enough to have been anything she wanted to be. The only thing that held her back was she was born in rural Indiana in the 1920s. The options for a woman just weren't there. When my dad was still very young, his parents divorced. His dad was, they're not going to, a single man's not going to get custody of a child. The judge did not think a divorced woman should have custody of a child. So my dad was going to be sent to an orphanage when an uncle stood up in the courtroom and said that he and his wife had no children and that they would raise my dad. The court thought that was a great idea. So my father was raised by an aunt and uncle. And my father had a childhood that he described as good, happy. Grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. In 1965, he was talking to Air Force recruiter. My dad always wanted to be a policeman. He was going to go into the Air Force to be security policeman in the Air Force. Then he met my mother at the end of 65. They got married. So he did not join the Air Force. They got married in 1966. 1 month later, my dad got drafted into the Army. And a couple months after that, off he went. Gone for 2 years, did 1 year in Vietnam. Returned home without physical injury. Looking back now, I realize that, I'm going to say most veterans that serve in a combat zone, there were injuries. They just weren't physical. But he returned. They lived in Fort Wayne. I came along. They decided to move out of the city. They moved to a small town where my dad's part of my dad's family was from, and that's where I grew up. My dad worked just various jobs that a man does, factory and things like that. And then he got into law enforcement. And he did that until my sister was born. There's 8 years difference between us. He did that until my sister was born, and then he got out of law enforcement because his family was growing. and he worked as an automobile mechanic, specializing in foreign and four-cylinder automobiles back when those were unique enough to be a specialty. He did that until I was in high school, and then he got a job at an aluminum foundry in the maintenance department, and that pretty quickly led to him being selected to be a foreman in the aluminum foundry. Remember that. We're going to come back to that. That's significant, the aluminum foundry. So he started doing that when I was in high school. When I was probably 21 or 22, my sister was in high school. My dad went back to law enforcement, got hired as a deputy marshal in the town they lived in. And he did that for quite a while, not quite a decade, but close. And then he would have been 50, trying to think here, when he was 50, a month before his 51st birthday, he was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. My parents' life turned upside down that day. His job, of course, ended that day, the day of the diagnosis. Though the town was wonderful, they paid him full salary, I think for like another 3 months or 6 months, but his actual work ended that day, understandably. And he and my mother moved to another state to where there were some family living. My dad began care at, he was getting care at the VA in Fort Wayne, and he began getting care at this new VA, where within a year, the doctor there, who had doctorates in both neurology and psychiatry, determined that early onset Alzheimer's was a misdiagnosis, that what my father had was aluminum poisoning. Remember back, he worked in an aluminum foundry when I was in high school. So it was similar to Alzheimer's, but progressed slower and didn't necessarily affect my dad's ability to reason, to have an intelligent conversation. He just wouldn't remember 10 minutes later he had had that conversation with you. But his cognitive ability, reasoning, communication still seemed to be okay. But it progressed. It was slower. And my father was an incredibly intelligent man. Some people almost didn't believe there was a problem because it took about 2 years of deterioration for him to get to what a lot of people would consider normal. But the deterioration continued. And when he was 58, my parents had their 39th wedding anniversary, and that was spent in an emergency room. Then, 20 years ago today, he turned 59. And 2 months later, my parents had their 40th wedding anniversary, which was spent in an emergency room again. And less than a month later, he passed away at age 59. So that's the story in a nutshell of my father. I'm getting very close to being the age he was when he passed away. But in memory of him, his lighter will now strike flame. Thank you for joining me.